Hi, you're joining me on the Listen Up Girl podcast. This is your daily LGBTQ plus news podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman. And today is Saturday, July 25th, 2026. And today we've got a federal program for LGBTQ plus veterans quietly dismantled by email, a member of Congress bringing poster boards of drag queens into a hearing room, an arrest in West Virginia that should make every protect the children politician in this country sit down, and a story from 1890s Manhattan that I've been thinking about all day. So let's get into it. First, the VA just read its LGBTQ plus Veterans Care Network. When starting with veterans, because this one happened quietly by email, the way these things usually do now. For 10 years, the Department of Veterans Affairs has run something called the LGBTQ plus Veteran Care Coordinator Program. Every region had designated coordinators. Their job was simple: help LGBTQ plus veterans find competent care inside a system that has not always known how to treat us. On Wednesday, July 22nd, an internal email went out to those coordinators and to the regional LGBTQ plus leaders. The message, the words LGBTQ plus are coming out of your titles. You have now, and I'm quoting the email, an expanded focus on supporting all veterans. National communications, processes, and procedures specific to the program discontinued. The email even told staff to save anything they wanted to keep off the internal LGBTQ plus resource site because it was going away. And here's what stings. Back in June, a directive came down ordering VA facilities to eliminate gender identity-based initiatives. Leadership told coordinators at the time, relax, nothing is changing, it's just a title change. So they went out and told their veterans exactly that. One provider described having to go back to those veterans now and admit it wasn't true. Their words, moral injury on top of moral injury. Another described it as a cruel erasure. And notice what did not get cut. Other population-specific programs at the VA are still standing, just not this one. Congressman Mark Takano, the lead Democrat on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, responded yesterday. He said everything this administration has done since the orange convicted felon took power, pushing prioritization, gutting care, is directly harming the veterans the VA exists to serve. And he pledged to defend every veteran's access to culturally competent care, including LGBTQ plus veterans. These are people who served, and the government just deleted them from a spreadsheet. Sick. Next, Nancy Mace brings drag queens to Congress on a poster board. So now to Washington, where outgoing Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who I'll remind you recently lost her bid to become governor of South Carolina, decided the real threat facing this country is a museum display. Mace spent Wednesday grilling Athea Hartage, director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, over an exhibit in the museum's Entertainment Nation section featuring RuPaul and true drag race queens. She brought printed materials and pictures of three queens to the hearing, poster boards in Congress. And then she said, putting that drag queens in front of children, her words, sexualizes them and makes them more vulnerable to people who want to rape or abuse them. She accused the museum director of representing queer pedophiles. She demanded Hartage answer whether men can become women, and Hartage, to her enormous credit, stated completely composed and told her that questions wasn't relevant to running a museum. Congresswoman Mary Miller of Illinois piled on, demanding to know what a crotch harness was. Hartage answered, deadpan, it's a two-piece garment, and noted that not one visitor had even complained about that display. Again, no complaints from any of the visitors at the museum. The queens on the poster board have thoughts. Candy Muse from season 13 posted 2 words, can I sue? Joey J from season 13 said she's already talking to her lawyer. The hearing is part of a broader push following a White House report issued on the 4th of July claiming the museum has been captured by a Marxist framework. That's the actual argument. A museum about American history framing an American entertainer. They don't have enough to do. They're trying to find things to do because they have nothing to do. Nancy Mace, you'll be gone soon. Next, a Protect the Children lawmaker arrested for preying on a child. The next one is difficult. I'm going to handle it carefully. David Elliott Pritt, 36 years old, a Republican member of the West Virginia House of Delegates and the chamber's assistant majority leader, was arrested Wednesday in federal charge of enticement of a minor. Pritt was also a school teacher. According to a federal criminal complaint, he began communicating with a student on the gaming platform Roblox during the 24-25 school year when she was in the 8th grade. These conversations allegedly moved to Snapchat. He allegedly told her he loved her, sent her explicit images, and asked her to meet him in a classroom at the high school where they both later ended up. The complaint alleges these encounters happened somewhere between 5 and 10 times. It alleges he kept requesting explicit photos through this month and told her in June not to say anything because it would create problems for him professionally. The investigation began on July 9th when the girl's family went to law enforcement. He has not entered a plea and he is presumed innocent until proven otherwise. That's how this works, and it should. But here's the part I need you to sit with. The arrest happened in a state whose legislator has spent years passing bills about bathrooms and sports and school policies, all of it wrapped in the language of protecting young girls from transgender people. The Republican Speaker of West Virginia House has called on Pritt to resign. Every single time, it's never the drag queen in the museum. It is never the trans kid in the locker room. It is the man with the microphone on the poster board in the bill. It's always those creepy fucking white Republicans. It's never the fucking drag queen or the transgender person. Never. Next, pig heads at a door in Kyiv. To Ukraine now on Tuesday morning, July 21st at 6:17 a.m., someone's left served pig heads and entrails at the entrance of a beauty salon in Kyiv called GX Bar. They also poured blood on across the doorstep. It was the same day of Kyiv's Equality March for LGBTQ plus rights. The salon said this is a accumulation of a month of targeting, coordinated attacks on their online listings, threats, property damage, leaked personal data, home address published, threats to physical violence against the staff and their families. They've had to hire security for the Kyiv locations. They've been reporting all of it to the police privately, staying quiet publicly to avoid feeding what they call an informative war. This crossed the line. Their statement is worth hearing. Everyone has the right to their own beliefs. Everyone has the right to disagree. But when you publish home addresses, when you threaten families and you terrorize staff, that is no longer freedom of expression. That is violence. They also wrote, it's happened to others before. Today it happened to us. Tomorrow it will happen to another Ukraine business brave enough to stand up for human values. And they said they will not change their values out of fear. They want to live in a country where their business doesn't have to be afraid to open its doors every morning. And for context, homosexuality is legal in the Ukraine. So are gender markers, adoption, military service, and blood donation. There are workplace anti-discrimination protections on the books. Marchers this year were pushing for civil partnerships. Counter-protesters showed up under a banner about defending public morality. 40 locations across 12 countries, and this is what it costs to say out loud that people deserve to live without fear. And then next we go to sex work or starve. So here's a consequence nobody is putting in a press release. When this administration gutted the U.S. aid, tens of thousands of people around the world lost their livelihoods overnight. Local staff, program workers, healthcare workers, embedded in communities, and the U.S. has spent decades building relationships with. New reporting shows some of these former aid employees have turned to sex work to survive. One person described it in 6 words. It is quite literally sex work or starve. Think about what that means. These people are running HIV prevention programs, running clinics, doing outreach. And the collapse of that funding has pushed some of them into the exact circumstances these programs existed to reduce. That is not an unintended consequence. That's just a consequence. The math always going to work this way, and the people who signed it are always the ones that cut it and knew it would happen. And now a win. A Ninth Circuit says no. Now to something that went our way. An Oregon education specialist named Roderick Thesis lost his appeal this week. Thesis was a licensed clinical social worker serving as an education specialist, and starting in 2024, he displayed anti-transgender children's books in his office, 2 titles pushing the idea that gender is fixed and unchangeable. plus a book about a well-known anti-trans provocateur. The complaint came in. The district determined that the displaying those books in an office where he met one-on-one with middle schoolers violated its Every Student Belongs policy, a policy adopted under Oregon law prohibiting discrimination in public education. They told him to stop. He sued, backed by a national anti-LGBTQ plus legal organization, claiming the First Amendment protected him. A district judge split the difference. He could display the books, but only when students weren't present. Then a new investigation found students had accessed the books anyway, and he discussed their contents with them, violating both the district policy and the court's order. He was fired. On Tuesday, a three-judge panel of the 9th District Circuit held up the lower court 2-1. The opinion leaned on what it called a robust body of precedents. Educators speak as government employees when they convey messages to students inside a school. The court also shut down the comparison to the 2022 praying coach case. The coach was in a moment of a private expression detached from his job. Thesis was doing his job. His lawyers say they are evaluating next steps, but right now the ruling stands. And our next story that I want to end with is the room above the brothel. So I want to end somewhere else entirely, somewhere else older. In the 1890s, in Manhattan, a group of people started meeting in a room called a brothel. They call themselves the Circle Hermaphrodites. It is the earliest known transgender advocacy group in this country, not a social club, an advocacy group. In the 1890s, they met in secret because they had to, and they organized around the idea that was, at the time, almost unthinkable, that they were not sick, not criminal, not alone, that they had the right to defend themselves against a world determined to erase them. More than 130 years later, we are watching a federal agency delete the letters LGBTQ plus from job titles. We are watching a congresswoman hold up pictures of drag queens like evidence. And I find something enormously steadying in knowing that people were already doing this work in 1890 in a rented room with no protections, no laws, no allies, and no guarantee anyone would ever know their names. They did it anyway. And here we are, still here, still talking about them. That's the whole thing, isn't it? Somebody's always got to go first. We salute them for even doing this back then. How brave are they? So that's the show for Saturday, July 25th. If today's episode gave you something worth caring, do me a favor, follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave a rating and a review. It genuinely helps more people find us, and share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. You can find me on Instagram and YouTube at The Real Zachary, and the show lives at listenupgirl.com. I'm Zach Randles-Friedman, and I'll be back tomorrow with more LGBTQ news. Thanks for listening.